Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2:34 p.m. on Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, and I call the Committee on Transportation to order. I'd like to welcome Committee Vice Chair Cordero and Committee members Kiaina, Okimoto, and Tupola. Before we start our meeting, I have some procedural announcements to make. Did I call Okimoto as well? Okay, good. Before we start our meeting, I have some procedural announcements to make. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be able to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda when the item is taken up in two ways: in person in the council chamber or remotely. Persons who registered to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by other persons who wish to testify. When your name is called, please proceed to the podium. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. I'll then call upon the registered remote testifiers, followed by persons standing by who wish to testify. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and follow the prompts. For those who are joining us by telephone only, I'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please listen to the prompt to unmute and press *6. For other persons who wish to testify, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom or press *9 on your telephone to indicate your desire to speak. Before testifying, each person shall state their name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. Some friendly reminders and tips: please video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you're called to testify. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I'll first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. And as a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of this meeting. I'd also like to welcome Councilmembers Say and Waters to our committee meeting today. First up on the agenda is Resolution 24-2, accepting a gift to the City of Lodging valued at $513.57 from the United States Department of Transportation Federal Transit Administration, FTA, for the Department of Transportation Services Director of Rapid Transit to attend the FTA Transit Advisory Committee for Safety meeting in Washington, D.C. from December 6th to 7th, 2023. We have with us the Director of Transportation Services, Roger Morton.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. This gift from the Federal Transit Administration was for lodging for a meeting that was held in Washington having to do with the Tracks Safety Committee of the Federal Transit Administration. Our Director of Rapid Transit, Patrick Prusher, attended this meeting. He is a member of the committee. The department made available lodging, and the city paid for the transportation to the event.
Okay, members, any questions for the Director? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. Clerks, do we have any registered in-person testifiers or anyone standing by who wishes to testify?
Chair, there are none.
And clerks, do we have any registered remote speakers or anyone standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. That being the case, members, we are in discussion. Any discussion on this matter? Okay. Seeing none, the chair recommends a resolution 24-2 be reported out for adoption. Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. We'll move on to agenda item number 2. This is resolution 24-3. This accepts a gift of travel, a gift to the city of travel, registration, and related expenses valued at $2,780.99 from the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies for the Deputy Director of the Department of Transportation Services to attend and participate in the Lake Arrowhead Symposium on the Transportation Land Use Environment Connection in Lake Arrowhead, California from October 15th to 17th, 2023. Members, please note that we have distributed a hand-carried proposed CD1, which is OCS 2024-0019, which makes the following amendments. A, it amends the title of the resolution to remove the words "of the department," to change the reference position title to the Deputy Director of Transportation Services. B, it amends the 4th whereas clause to correct the dates of the Lake Arrowhead Symposium. And C, it makes miscellaneous technical and non-substantive amendments. We have again with us the Director of the Department of Transportation Services, Roger Morton.
And for the record, Roger Morton, Director of Transportation Services. This was an invitation, a personal invitation from the UCLA Transportation Institute, to John, to come and speak particularly about Skyline and other similar systems in the country. It was a prestigious invitation, and we were happy to accept the invitation by the UCLA Transportation Agency.
Members, any questions for the director? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Clerks, do we have any registered in-person testifiers for this item? Or
Chair, there are none.
anyone waiting to stand by to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, and then clerks, do we have any registered remote testifiers or anyone standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, very well. Members, we are in discussion on this agenda item. Members, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, the chair recommends that Resolution 24-3 be amended to the hand-carried CD1, that is OCS 2024-0019. Any objections or reservations to the recommendation to amend? Okay, hearing none, the resolution is amended to the CD1. The chair then recommends a Resolution 24-3 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Members, now we are on agenda item number 3. This is Resolution 24-5, accepting a gift to the city of 2 real-time information bus stop signs with a total value of $17,500 from WaySign LLC for installation at 2 bus stops within the Halava Skyline Station for the benefit of transit passengers. We have with us the Director of Transportation Services, and I understand that we also have a very special guest with us that the Director will be introducing, so I'll turn over to the Director.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, again, Roger Morton, Director of Transportation Services. A little personal history here. I want to introduce and recognize particularly Carl Chang. Carl, as some of you would know, was the co-founder of Verifone, a very successful credit card machine that validated credit cards, and was in fact the first device of its kind in the world. And so Carl's reputation is one, he revolutionized commerce at retail. Ultimately, subsequently, Verifone was sold to Hewlett-Packard for about $1.2 billion. So it was a big deal because it was invented in Hawaii. And it was a Hawaii company until they moved to California. After that sale, I have known Carl myself personally for 45 years. We worked together previously, and I recall installing a $100,000 sign at our Kalihi Transit Center that showed when the buses were coming. And I mentioned to Carl that there's got to be a cheaper way to do this. And that was about 10 years ago. And since then, Carl has created a firm, and I'd like to have them come up and talk to you folks. But Carl has invented a firm to build these machines. These machines are sold throughout the United States right now, and I'm proud to say that they're manufactured in IAEA with a local workforce. And I'm proud of what Carl has done. Now he's donating these 2 signs to us so that we can put them at our rail stations. We know that studies have shown that transit riders sometimes get edgy at the bus stops, wondering when is the bus really going to come, and this is one means of doing that. With your indulgence, I'd like to call up Scott Seaburn, who's one of the engineers with WaySign, which is the manufacturing company, just to say a few words about how their company works and who they are.
Thank you. My name is Scott Seaburn. I'm the head of engineering and operations at WaySign. And as Roger mentioned, Carl was the co-founder of Verifone, and after the company was sold, he sort of went into retirement for a while, but he's got an incredibly active mind, so that wasn't going to last too long. And having conversations with Roger led him to his next creative outlet, which is WaySign, which has been in operations since 2013 in IAEA. And this is the sign that we will be donating. And it's a solar-powered sign that sits on the top of a bus stop, higher than most people can reach, so it's vandal resistant. It has very, very bright LEDs and provides arrival information on the second row and the current time. And these allow passengers to, riders to see when their bus is going to arrive. It also has safety lights on the bottom that at night, if you walk in front of the sign, it will illuminate the area, which makes it safer on areas that are not well lit. And then there's also an ADA compliant audio announcement that tells you that the bus is about to arrive. And so that's one of the products that we have. We also have other products that provide similar capabilities. We have what's called an e-paper sign that's like a Kindle. It also provides information about arrival times. And then we also have a system called AVAS that goes inside the bus that announces when the door is opening and closing and when the bus is stopping. Now, also, so Carl's been introduced. There's also David Brennan is here too. He's our mechanical engineer. David's alumnus of Kamehameha Schools and the University of Hawaii. I also attended Leeward Community College and the University of Hawaii. And Carl, I think was mentioned before, he was a graduate of Roosevelt High School and MIT. So we have a lot of people here that, grew up in Hawaii for the most part. And we have recently been awarded a contract for Houston to deliver approximately 3,000 of these signs to the transit agency in Houston over the next 3 years. So that will keep us very busy. As a result, we've had to expand our facilities in IAEA, and we're looking at increasing our staff, and as a result also. We have over 40 agencies that in the US and Canada that we provide these signs to. And we have over 1,000 signs deployed, and they're very, very durable and have survived hurricanes and harsh weather in places like Quebec. We have about, I think it's 80 signs in Quebec, and we have some spectacular pictures with snow-covered signs that we're continue to work. Anyhow, that is enough about the signs. As I mentioned, we've got over 1,000 of these deployed, and we hope to deploy many thousands more on the mainland. And thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Members, any questions about this? It was very interesting to learn that we're making these here in Hawaii, and in particular in Councilmember Cordero's district. Councilmember Say.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just bring this question up, which really bothers me, that this particular type of a project should have been financed with capital improvement monies, bond monies. That's the problem I foresee in the future now.
I'm going to turn that over to Carl.
Because
to Roger.
Director Morton, you know how much the past 3 years I've voiced my concern about what are we doing at our stations? We don't even have solar panels, and we're running on electricity. So here I'm trying to cut the costs for your operations, and they don't even listen to us.
Well, the city is putting in solar through the Department of Design and Construction at several of our transit centers now. Thank you for pushing us in the right direction, that we are installing additional solar at Pearl City, and we are installing solar at our Kalihi Transit Center. I wish that we would, in a future time, take a look at all of our stations to see whether or not we can also do that. We're doing it through a purchase program where a vendor comes in. I think it's vendor comes in and puts all the upfront money and installs the solar, and we buy the electricity back over many years. It's a Department of Design and Construction program, but we are doing that.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Director Martin, we have these two that are just gifted to us. What is the plan for future acquisitions or future of these signs to be allowed throughout the island?
Well, I think that I don't see these signs going at every bus stop. We have 3,000 or 4,000 bus stops, but where there are lots of buses coming together, where there's lots of people, I think these kind of signs make good sense. What I would hope to do would be to start to mold our transit improvement program using federal funds to do these types of projects where we can. And usually that's like part of a bigger project, but that's a good way to make them affordable. I would say, of course, we do provide similar information on people's iPhones or their Android phones. So there's multiple ways that we could do it. But I think at rail systems, it's a natural at a rail station type of place where many buses are meeting.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you. And thank you to the team from Wayside for coming into town. It's very impressive that this is a technology that's from right here in Hawaii and is being manufactured right here. At this time, we'll call for testimony. So we'll proceed with in-person testimony here in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any registered in-person testifiers or anyone waiting to testify in the chamber?
Chair, there are none.
And then clerks, do we have any registered remote speakers or anyone standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we're in discussion. Members, any further discussion on the acceptance of the gift of these two signs for the Halaba Skyline Station? Okay, hearing none, the chair recommends Resolution 24-5 be reported out for adoption. Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you. Members, we'll move on now to our informational briefing items. First, we'll take item number 4, which is an update on the status of actions identified in the Department of Transportation Services Oahu Pedestrian Plan. Members, for your information, we've distributed a copy of the pedestrian plan to each of you, and it's also available online as Departmental Communication 16. And now the department will be providing us with a brief presentation. So we have with us Roger Morton, the Director of the Department of Transportation Services, as well as Daniel Alexander, Planner 3 with the Department of Transportation Services.
Thank you. Roger Morton again for the record. I'd like to ask Daniel to come up and make a presentation to you. And I note that we also have, from our staff, we have Renee Espial, who's our Complete Streets Administrator, and also here to assist with any questions that might come up.
Thank you, Roger. Is it possible to get the slides up? So I'll start introducing myself. Daniel Alexander. I'm with City and County Department of Transportation Services. I'm the Vision Zero Coordinator, and I was the project manager on the Oahu Pedestrian Plan. And I really appreciate you folks taking the time to hear an update on what's going on and all your actions to make its recommendations possible. Are they?
Right. Yeah, I think while we get the technology ironed out here, perhaps we might call for any in-person testifiers. Clerks, is there any in-person testimony in this item or anybody standing by in the chamber to testify?
Chair, there are none.
And then clerks, do we have any registered remote speakers or anyone waiting remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, good. Very well, we'll wait for the slides here.
Let me turn it back on.
Yeah, some share screen issues.
While we wait for the slides, the way sign is still in the corner there if anyone wants to go check it out. No, can you? while we we have the lights going. Oh, great. Well, why don't, while we figure out the technology, why don't we call a brief recess subject to the call of the chair? All right, members, thanks for your indulgence while we iron out technical difficulties. But now that we've gotten it resolved, we'll proceed with the presentation about the Oahu pedestrian plan. So Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'll jump in. So the Oahu pedestrian plan, it was developed in the kind of 2020 to 2022 period. It was finalized in 2022 and adopted by your body in December of 2022. So it's our first, that is the City and County of Honolulu's first island-wide pedestrian master plan. It's really quite an undertaking, and it creates a long-term action plan for making walking safer and more viable transportation option on Oahu. And table of contents here, so I'll go over some of this in greater detail, but I just point out on this, a really important piece of it was an existing conditions inventory. So we didn't have that at the time of the plan, where we knew where all the sidewalks were, their widths, et cetera. So a big lift at the beginning was looking at existing conditions and mapping that all out. And also, of course, safety dimensions were important within existing conditions too. So I'll get more into the actions here. So a critical component of the plan was safety. Unfortunately, we have far too many fatalities on our streets. There were 105 fatalities in the 5 years that we looked at through this pedestrian plan and the existing conditions. And one of the really important things the plan did was identify our high pedestrian injury corridors, so streets where we're having disproportionate amounts of pedestrian safety issues and intersections as well. So that was a really important existing condition that the plan built on, and many of the actions sought to address. A number of the actions are focused on us doing planning and implementing actions within that high pedestrian injury corridors and intersections. There were other important pieces here. One I'll highlight that we're working on was to adopt a Vision Zero action plan. That's something we're developing now, but that's expanding the scope beyond pedestrians to look at all modes and what we can do to create a safer island where everyone can get around safely. Happy to say that we did receive federal funding to look at some of those high pedestrian injury corridors. Many of them, we already have a Complete Streets project in place that we have a plan or we have something in the works to improve safety on them. And what we did with this federal funding opportunity was we put in for planning funds to look at some of those critical streets that we hadn't had the opportunity to look at previously. So that's been funded, and we look forward to a planning process that identifies specific improvements for this collection of streets within our urban core. All of which within those high pedestrian injury locations, they're identified as Tier 1 or 2, and Tier 2 being worse, and these are all Tier 1 streets. So another really important component was we developed what we called the Pedestrian Priority Network, and it was around 400 miles of our streets that were of great importance for people getting around by foot. The kind of building blocks were our busway network, connections to schools and parks, connections to job centers and commercial centers. And then within that, we prioritized for walkway projects on our biggest streets, our major streets, and in school zones, those servicing kids getting to and from school. So that's some of the most important actions here, and some of these are being undertaken through standalone projects. Others, we're looking at the Rehabilitation of Streets program and opportunities to implement pedestrian improvements as part of those projects. Just note, through our inventory, we identified that we have 900 miles of missing sidewalk on the street network. And of course, that's a really large undertaking. So we prioritize within that, and that kind of cumulative group was order of magnitude $2.6 billion in cost if we were to build out sidewalks on all of them. And we prioritized it down, like I said, within those major streets and the school zones. And it's still a really big chunk, about $547 million worth of projects that were prioritized for implementation. Here's a list of initial projects we're looking at. Those were prioritized by Tier 1, 2, and 3. And we've looked at packages around neighborhoods, the idea that they would have greater impact and there would be benefits to operating in a neighborhood zone. So here's a list of those. I won't read them all out in full, but with the exception of the NAHOA kind of Makiki package, all of these have gotten some level of federal transportation funding to start the planning process. And there's still going to be more steps to seeing those through to design and implementation, but they are, getting started at some level. And then infrastructure is really important, but as is education, enforcement, encouragement. So the plan did have actions around those as well. And some of these are actions that DTS is undertaking. Some are working with partners, including the Honolulu Police Department, and others. So just kind of quickly go through these, but, working, walk events, Safe Routes to School. We actually, within DTS, we have a Safe Routes to School coordinator who's been working with schools on encouragement and education activities. Partners like WalkWise Hawaii that we work with as well. And so on the encouragement side, I will point out too, one of the accomplishments since the plan was published was our transportation demand management plan that was finished last year. And that has various actions in it. So it really dug into that piece more so. And of course, we've seen some major transit improvements come into place. Enforcement, of course, an important piece, and we've been working with the police closely through our pedestrian safety and education stuff. Some additional enforcement stuff here, and I won't go over these in much detail here, but move along. Some of the programs that we're working on advancing, I'll just highlight two that we put quite a bit of energy into the Safe Routes to School program. It's working with a number of schools on education and encouragement activities, and the pedestrian education program, which both has a school component where we educate third graders, but it also has sign wavings with the police, speaking with various populations, going to table events, that sort of thing. And we've also done, some social media sort of stuff as well. So I'll go through some of the actions. This is on the infrastructure side of what we've either accomplished or is in an advanced state. So I'll just note that all these are actually summarized in the Complete Streets annual report. And these are the highlight of items that are, pedestrian focused. We've improved quite a few crosswalks. So that's a really important issue for us. So 15 of them went in the last fiscal year. Lots of new curb ramps. That's, of course, our partner agency, DDC, and actually constructed some new walkways as well. So the mileage seems modest, but, every project is a really significant undertaking. So, that half mile is actually a really important half mile in Kalihi. And I think I have an image there dedicated to it. Fern Elementary School, the Safe Routes to School project, that connected the Kahio Park Terrace housing area with the elementary school where the vast majority of kids walk. And some other projects highlight. So one, we put in the first rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is those flashing beacons that pedestrians activate and let drivers know, hey, a pedestrian's trying to cross the street. They've proven really effective at improving safety, and one of those was installed at North King Street, Richard Lane. Other projects point to Alalima Street in Salt Lake, where we put in some quick build solutions, and Kanoa Street, another quick build project. We have some projects in construction. So the Kalike Mall improvements going in, various sidewalk improvements in Chinatown, Kalakaua Avenue, that's going to be restriped soon, and we'll get enhanced pedestrian crossings like the picture there on the upper right. And the Salt Lake Boulevard project that's being implemented by DDC the first phase will include new sidewalks on a critical piece of that facility. We have quite a few projects in final design. Another RFB there in Kaneohe at Kamehameha Highway and Pahia Road, and some other ones, Honolulu Road, that's near a school, and another RFB that was going to go in there. Kamehameha Highway, the picture, sorry, I don't have a picture, sorry. But Kamehameha Highway through Haleiwa, the shoulder improvements, they're going in. DDC also implementing that one. Mahoy Street, Waipio Point Access Road, and Waipio Depot Road. And then, the Complete Streets, like I said, has been tackling a lot of our high pedestrian injury projects. So one I'll point out is Kamehameha Highway through Kaneohe Town. So the whole thing has a Complete Streets plan, and that is going to be implemented with the upcoming rehabilitation of streets there. So I think that's it. And I'll just, as I know, I've got, of course, Director Morton here, but I also have Renee Espiau, the Complete Streets Administrator, who can probably provide better information on some of the projects if you have specific project information.
Members, any questions for the department? Vice Chair Kia Aina, and then Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And, especially for my district, we greatly appreciate what you guys have done. I know with the flashing lights in Maine off of Kailua Road, it's been very, very helpful, so appreciate it. But I've just shared that I am deeply concerned about Aulike and Ku'ule Road. I was just there helping a kupuna cross the street. I cannot force her to go up to Oneava. She was there with her walker, and you have cars speeding, and I had to hold my hand up. That happens every day because there's a senior home there, and a lot of elementary school students and their parents cross there to go to the elementary school. And this traffic light was supposed to be put up in November of last year. So do you know the status of that?
Renee Espiau does.
Hi, Chair. Members of the committee, Renee Espio, Complete Streets Administrator. Thank you for the heads up, council member. So it looks like we finally got the federal funding for construction. My understanding was that that phase, that traffic signal phase, that includes a number of projects, including that one, were hung up in, I don't know, federal paperwork snafu is my outside observation, but it looks like it's figured out, and they're working to allocate the funding, and they've also asked or offered to ask the contractor to prioritize the Aulike improvement over the other intersections that are in the package.
Okay, and so what are we looking at? First quarter of this year?
I don't think so. They still have to execute the contract. So let me work on a more specific timeline.
Yes, and it's
and then
not
I'll get
just
it back to
because
you.
I see it a lot, but you already know, you live in
know.
Kailua. It's
It
very,
makes
very
me
dangerous.
cringe.
I'm just waiting for someone to get hit.
I know. Totally
And
spot
then
on.
thank you so much for being in the final stages for Kaneohe.
Yes.
Do we have any time frame for that?
So DDC is working to bid the project this fiscal year. So they're using lapsing funds, so they hope to have that fully encumbered and contracted by June. So hopefully should be starting the end of the year, hopefully.
Okay, with regard to implementation.
Yes, for
Okay.
construction, yes.
Anyway, thank you guys for all of your hard work.
Yes, and then I will note there are 2 other traffic signal improvements in the Aulike package on Kamehameha. So there's the RRFB at Pahia that I know the community has been asking for quite a while.
Okay.
And then I think there's a left turn addition at Haiku Road. So
Okay.
I can email you all 3 of those.
Thank you so much.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tupola.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to thank DTS. They did an outstanding job just earlier this week. They met with myself, my office, and we went over every single sidewalk and street. So thank you guys, because we are, diligently following up with schools and kind of like Councilmember Kiana said, serious intersections. So I just want to shout out Renee from DTS because we had a serious intersection in Kapolei by Mehana, and they implemented no left turns, which they call R cuts, which honestly I think saved lives because we had so many accidents in that intersection. They even had an accident plot graph when we had the town hall because there was so many accidents. So just wanted to say thank you because DTS is doing an outstanding job. Director Morton, good job. Okay, so here are my suggestions, and it doesn't specifically have to do with sidewalks, but this may or may not be your division, but it is about crosswalks, pedestrian safety. So State DOT has a website about pedestrian safety because they have Walkwise, as you mentioned earlier. You guys have your form of it in the city and county. But also HPD has a traffic division page. And on their traffic division page, they actually have breakouts for pedestrian laws, bicycle safety. So one of the communities in my district called Kamakana, it's kind of new, by Waikai and Eva, their entire town hall they had, which I don't know why anyone else was invited, was just all about traffic and pedestrian safety. So my suggestion to the department is to maybe look at HPD's website because HPD and DOT reference the law. Our website doesn't. It kind of has links to others. But when we're talking to people about pedestrian safety or like what is allowed on a bike, what's not, especially with the danger of e-bikes that are now on crosswalk or sidewalks and people getting hit, we need to have references to the law because people wanted to know, like, is that legal? Can they be on the sidewalk with an electric bike? Is that safe? Are they allowed to have a phone and operate an e-bike? So that was one suggestion. The second thing is that one of the branches of the traffic division of HPD does the JPO program. And they also are over, the kupuna that help the kids cross. They're also over that program, and there's a lot of kupuna that are passing away, and they're not able to get new crossing guards. I think that that's something that obviously falls within the city because it's just the little streets in front of most of our schools, but very few of those crossing guards are left. And the allocation for the money for this safety program is through HPD. So just a suggestion on how we could kind of start to streamline, since all 3 of the websites are almost identical, but we're just missing some key components like references to the law. I think you guys should heavily think about partnerships with HPD for the crossing because they do a lot of, safety stuff. You mentioned it, but a little bit more because I think that would help to round out our presentation on how we're taking pedestrian safety seriously. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Floor Leader Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Mr. Alexander. My question has to do with general questions with the presentation and status update. First up, on the education, encouragement, and enforcement pedestrian programs. I know that we mentioned the new mobility programs, which includes the new mobility policy that the council and hopefully DTS, that the council has been waiting from DTS. Do we have a timeline from the department on when that's going to be provided and introduced?
Yeah.
So the state has passed the e-scooter law, and so that I think what's missing from that, because we've talked about coming to the council and being more restrictive than the state law, which the state law empowers the county to do that, to be more restrictive. So I think that the things that we're looking at, the department is looking at, is restricting what type of streets that scooters could be on. And we're thinking that a scooter could not be on a street that was more than 25 miles per hour. That's one thought that we have. We're considering the issue of helmets. By law, everybody under 16 has to wear a helmet, and there's lots of flagrant violations throughout the city on that. Where I think that we really need to concentrate our efforts more than that is on education, because I think, you have to be. I see a lot of kids, even in middle schools. The DOE is cooperating and providing parking for e-scooters for children that are less than 15 years old. I think that we just need to have. I think we need within DTS and HPD both need to do a better job of actually communicating the law. And this gets back to what Councilmember Tupola was talking about too, that it's not legal now for kids less than 15 to operate motorized scooters. And so I think enforcement is one issue, but I think education is the other issue. The other part of scooters that other cities have done is the commercialization of the scooters on the street. And you guys all go to conferences in other cities where you see these scooters on the streets. My personal view is that our streets in Honolulu are too narrow, our sidewalks are too small, and that with our tourist population, it would quickly go out of control and we would have clutter all over the place. That's my personal view, so I'm not supportive of going forward with that. I do make a distinction between scooters and e-bikes. I think they're two different things. I think e-bikes are, especially those that are pedal-assisted e-bikes, are safer and present less of an issue than the scooters. Obviously, scooters are legal for consumers. I was a little rambling there, but I don't know whether that answers the question. We will ultimately come to council with an ordinance request that will be further restricting the use of scooters beyond what the requirements are within the state transportation code.
Okay, thank you. And do you know the timeline for that coming before the council?
I don't have a timeline for you, but I think I don't really want to commit one right here, but I hear the importance that you have, and we've certainly had discussions here.
Yes.
It's a question of our capacity to do it right and put something together right that we would take to council. And my deputy has been running with that project, and I don't want I know he has a more in-depth understanding of where we are with that timeline than I do at this point.
Okay. Well, I do look forward to hearing about that because I think we have been discussing it since the state legislature from that past session did authorize the counties to, I guess, enforce or enact their own policy. I mean, an additional policy from the state. So really looking forward to it. I know that is something both my staff and I have been following up with DTS. My next question is in relation to, we know there's tiers of priority for especially crosswalks, and I've never heard of the R curbing, or crossing, which Council Member Tupola brought up. That's interesting to hear. But are we utilizing the agreement with the state to install raised crossings at the locations identified in the plan? Because currently there are, I mean, I may or may not know, they are installed in possible locations that have been outside of the plan.
There's been an explosion in the installation of traffic control devices such as speed humps, raised crosswalks. I think I saw a number in the first 6 months. We did about 33 island-wide, which is far surpassing anything we've ever done before. Part of the reason for that has been the State Department of Transportation has allowed us to utilize their master agreement to install them, and so we're doing them much quicker than we did. Your question was whether we're installing outside of the tiers, and the answer is, in some cases, yes, we are. And I'll ask Renee if she wants to comment further on the priority of those. She's grabbing her.
I love this plan.
Yeah.
I do flip it open all the time. Almost every day I open this thing. Well, one notable example is Kapi'olani at Kamakee, right? We all know that's a high pedestrian injury corridor. All of Kapi'olani is, unfortunately, and we're all too familiar, I think, with the recent incident there. And then Pensacola, we just got 4 raised crosswalks, sort of in the same vicinity, which is on the pedestrian priority network. So it's a mix. Some are, and some are speeding complaints that have been just lingering for a very long time in communities. So it's a bit of a mix there. But if you have any particular locations that you're really concerned about, share them with us, and we'll see if being on the plan can help move them up.
No, I was just wondering, because we know we have the priority tiers, and then of course we have heard about the different ones that have been outside of the priority tiers.
Yeah, there are some that are outside, just because I think a lot of it is elected officials trying to respond to their constituents. But we try to follow the plan as much as we can for our own investments. But of course, we're going to take up the state if they're offering to put in something where there's been an ongoing community concern for a while.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Director Martin, you mentioned when we talked about the e-bikes or the e-scooters, enforcement and education. I know that, I think, again, in most of our districts, we're faced with that issue with e-bikes. And it is right now not legal to have a person below 15 years riding these things, but the reality is it's happening everywhere. And so when you talk about education and enforcement, one of my pet peeves is when we put legislation through that we can't have enforced. And so this unfortunately happens to be one of them. Do you have suggestions on how we can address it? Because really it's parents, even in my community, there's parents with their kids under 15 years old that are going around on the sidewalks and the streets and pathways and riding these e-bikes and scooters and so forth. So do you have a plan when you talk about the importance of education?
We have a plan to look at what the county can do in an ordinance to further control the use of scooters. That part we have. Now, as to the age of the scooters, I'm certainly aware, I've been to many middle schools where lots of children under 15 ride to school every day. Maybe that's okay at a certain level. Maybe 15 is an arbitrary number. Not sure. I do agree with you that it's widespread. And sometimes I do see children that are clearly way too young to be riding these scooters. And I don't have a personal opinion on that, but the law right now, state law, which is not likely to change, is that the minimum age is 15. So that's where I think that we should be focused on.
I think, and we have to, moving forward, I've contacted HPD multiple times. I know that we have to figure something out because it's a concern across the island. We still get calls. I'll still get messages from constituents who are concerned about it. But thank you for sharing that. I had a question about crosswalks as well. I understand that, again, in every area, there's a need. Can you explain to us the process? Because when somebody comes to us with a concern or requesting a crosswalk or something adjusted, for the best result we have is 6 months. And so many times our community constituents want to know how we can get things fixed right away. But if you could help us so that when we go back to our communities and explain to them what we're doing and what, when working with you guys, what the process is and why it takes 6 months or longer.
Well, the reason it takes 6 months or longer is because we have historically followed the manual uniform traffic control devices, which have warrants and criteria on where, what are the pedestrian volumes that warrant having a crosswalk or a particular type of control. Some of these are time consuming, but it means that we need to send our staff of surveyors out onto the field to actually start counting people and to do those types of studies. The manual of interest is, was a revised manual, which is, in my opinion, more suited for urbanized areas like Honolulu and city streets, was released by the Federal Highways Administration about a week ago. And it's now up for a 2-year review period to look at it. So there's been a lot of debate nationally over whether some of these standards that we have used that come out of a federal manual and for certain reasons are, certain purposes are absolutely required that we follow. For example, on traffic signals, those are expensive, and we usually use federal funds for those. But in order to use federal funds, the particular cross area, the intersection has to meet the warrants within the manual. Otherwise, we can put them in, but we do it at 100% local funding. So there are issues like that. There's a great debate over that, and that's why it takes 6 months, is because the warrants that we have historically followed have a process, and part of the process is to do a lot of data collection and then to see whether or not the crosswalk fits within the number of pedestrians that are crossing, for example.
Okay, thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Say, and then Chair Waters.
Thank you very much, Director Morton. A couple of questions. The first question would be, could we do a moratorium as far as having no conveyance of roads in limbo to the county? The reason why I pose this question is because if we can't even take care of what we have today as far as public safety, why are we accepting more as far as these roads in limbo? And if we do, is forced into it by the state, let's state for the record that you need some funding for this unfunded mandate. It's crazy. The more we acquire through the roads in limbo legislation that they have, with the Department of Transportation director saying, okay, I don't think we have the resources, Director Morton, to take care of it.
The state has more clout than the county has in doing that, obviously. They pass state laws. But my understanding of the way the process works is, and I'll give an example of the Kaka'ako streets that were transferred to the state, or were always state roads, really, according to the court. And the state would has to take those over. The mechanism that they will probably use will be an executive order for which we don't have any recourse. However, in that case, we are working with the State Department of Transportation to allocate federal funds at 80% level for those streets, quite a bit of money actually. And the state has agreed in principle, although we don't have a written agreement, to fund 10% or half of the local share. I know that doesn't answer all your questions, council member, but that's the attempt. And it works both ways. We are talking to the state about taking on some streets in Waianae. And that our city streets or private streets and city streets where they would go back to the state inventory. So a complicated issue. Sometimes we can't resolve it because it is so complicated. But that's where we're at with the streets that you're talking about.
No, your point is very well taken, and I can appreciate and attest to what you're saying very much as far as your integrity and honesty. But then I would tell myself, being this is my 4th year, in the development of this Oahu pedestrian plan, wouldn't the first priority for the county of Oahu, you should have focused on your primary urban center because of the density?
We focus a lot of attention on the primary urban center, but we also, we recognize that this is a island-wide issue, and that we focus on all parts of the island when we put the plans together. I would say a majority of the expenditures would go to the primary urban center, though.
Okay, thank you. That's what the residents want to hear from the primary urban center and East Oahu development plans. And finally, I wanted to say, Renee, thank you very much for the pilot project in regards to safe streets. See, my next question would be, after your pilot project is completed, how do we follow up in seeing that particular area that we had the pilot continues on as far as being a safe street? That was the Makali area.
Oh, yes. Okay, so we did a project during COVID where we put a lot of signs and cones and stuff out in the road to try to make more space for people to walk and bike. One, because we knew people were not able to go to recreational amenities. We knew people were home a lot and were kind of out walking in their neighborhood. And we were encouraged to do so as part of our participation in the Bloomberg Climate Challenge. What we found as part of that fun project was that we really need some infrastructure improvements in our neighborhood as well. So that McCully neighborhood is in our first round of sidewalk projects, because we heard that kind of loud and clear from the community, like, this is cool, this is great, but come on, let's build some sidewalks and invest some money in our community, because clearly the need is there. So that's kind of how we hope to build on all of our pilots, is see how it works, and then hopefully follow up with a more capital project after that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. And it's very nice to see you. When both Chair Waters and I attend the St. Louis Heights Diamond Head Kapahulu Neighborhood Board, boy, you're always there too for Montserrat and Diamond Head Road.
I'll be there next month too.
8th Street,
Yep.
Harding, you name it, it goes on.
Yeah, lots of stuff in town.
But thank you very much
No problem.
for the service.
Okay, Chair Waters.
Thank you. I've noticed over the last couple years that the city has been darkening out or blacking out painted sidewalks. And is that part of the Oahu pedestrian plan? And what is the rationale behind that?
That's a wonderful question. Okay, so uncontrolled crosswalks are crosswalks that are generally kind of maybe mid-block or at smaller intersections where there's no traffic light or no stop sign, right? So these are, the onus is on the driver to see the pedestrian and stop and let them cross without a red light or something else. As you can imagine, these kinds of crosswalks are somewhat inherently risky, right? Because you don't have really strong visual cues to the driver, and they may not see pedestrians. We had some standards for these kinds of uncontrolled crosswalks. We still have them, but they've been recently updated. The previous version of these guidelines, which are based on federal standards, said that if it was, more than basically 4 lanes, so take King Street, you have like 5, 6 lanes, and some of those removals, a lot of those removals were on King Street. they said that something like a flashing beacon is not enough. You need like a full traffic signal, or you need a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is like a half signal, and we don't really do those here. And so as a result, we were removing a lot of crosswalks because we didn't, one, we couldn't meet the signal warrants that Roger was talking about, or two, it just didn't, like the usage was so low that that huge amount of investment didn't really make sense in that location. So that's where we were a few years ago when there was kind of a flurry of these crosswalk blackouts. We have since updated our guidelines based on some new research out there, and we are very, very happy to find that our most typical cross sections, which honestly is like a 4-lane street, like a school street or Waimano Home Road, basically 2 lanes in each direction, Hawaii Kai Drive or something like that, those now can qualify for the flashing beacon instead of a full signal to remain. And so this is why you see we did the Kailua RRFB, we did the one on North King Street. I've got a pilot project to do like a value engineered version of this flashing beacon, one on School Street and one on Date Street, so we can figure out how to do these faster and cheaper. And so you probably, I hope you've noticed, we're not removing that many crosswalks anymore. And part of that is because our new guidelines allow for a more feasible what's called like a countermeasure, basically a safety feature that go along with those uncontrolled crosswalks. Does that make sense?
Yes. Are these guidelines determined by the federal government, or is it a city guideline?
Technically, the federal government puts out, for local streets, they put out best practices, they put out those kind of things, but they do not put out standards for local streets. Those standards are adopted by the city. Now, as I mentioned, in the case of when they're going to give us money for like traffic signals, then those can be warranted. In other words, we're not going to give you money for something that's not warranted. But there's a little sensitivity sometimes when we use the term federal standard. Yes, the feds and the manual put out, information, guidance, those things. But it's up to each municipality or each county to adopt their own, how they interpret these and what they allow. The feds are very sensitive that they do not regulate local streets.
So I'm not sure if people are just getting used to the fact that they no longer have a sidewalk, or they just got tired of complaining, because I'm not getting as many complaints, that's for sure. But I still notice people darting across the street.
Yeah, and it's a complicated thing, because first, why did they even start this? And the reason was because of big data studies that they did do that showed that in uncontrolled situations where there were multiple lanes, as Renee was describing, there were actually more incidents, collisions, accidents, where there were marked crosswalks than where there were not. Sort of counterintuitive, but that's what their big data studies showed, and that's what drove the country to relook at the way we do crosswalks. Now, there are marked crosswalks and there are unmarked crosswalks. Unmarked crosswalks have some criteria. There needs to be intersecting streets. They need to be X number of feet from where there is a controlled crosswalk. The distinction is you won't get a jaywalking ticket there. I'm not endorsing it as a safe place to cross, but the traffic code provides for marked and unmarked crosswalks.
I think my staff did some research on that. For example, right outside of the Holly on King Street, there's a side street going between the church and, I guess it's still church property, but right behind Koihao Church. So if you cross there, that would be considered an unmarked crosswalk?
That's my understanding, is that would be an unmarked crosswalk there.
Okay. Maybe we should have a different name because
Where did I mean that's
you
the,
end up
that's
guessing, right? An
that's the
unmarked
terminology
crosswalk.
that's in the you know in the traffic code, and again, you know there may be a need for some you know discussion to the public that often gets confused by what is a crosswalk, what's an unmarked crosswalk, what's a marked crosswalk, and what are the differences.
But the idea that it is that an unmarked crosswalk is legal to cross.
There are nuances of difference. You're not,
Right.
you know, you're not supposed to interrupt the general flow of traffic in an unmarked crosswalk. So the onus is a little bit more on the pedestrian to make sure that if they do cross, that they, I don't want to say they cross at their own risk, but to make sure that they are crossing at a safe time.
I gotta tell you, it feels like playing Frogger crossing there. You guys know what the Frogger game is?
I think the chair and I have crossed there together sometimes too.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Councilmember Tupola.
Sorry, to be fast. Just since the director is up, as it's coming to my head, I'm going to forget if I don't tell you right now, but you know what Councilmember Okimoto said about safety, advocacy, education, it's super huge because, I mean, preventative action is always 1,000 times better than responding to something, an accident, a crash, a fatality that happens after the case. So I really think you guys should get with HPD Traffic Division because in their JPO training, they have like field days and like these kids are so excited about pedestrian safety. They're the ones that put the signs down. Like you guys should have them be ambassadors of pedestrian safety and have them teach, because I know on your website it states we do presentations. So I'm not sure how many presentations you do, but it'd be very cool if it was part of the JPO program that the kids kind of understand the laws, know the laws, teach their peers, because that's a perfect time to get them to advocate to others that are around their age. Hey, this is how you safely cross the road. And I know it's not currently part of the program, but you know, Major Stason Tanaka, he's over the traffic division. I think that would kind of alleviate, we don't need to find extra funding. They have funding for it. They go to the schools twice a week. So if they're at the school twice a week, they can start to talk to the kids and build that into the curriculum that they work with them. And it would, of course, benefit your department because all of these things like how to be old enough to ride a bike or e-bikes, all the kids would start to memorize it if it was something cool. So just a thought.
Excellent idea. I know my daughter, when she was JPO at Ha'ione.
Oh, that's the elementary I went to. Yeah.
I know.
I was at JPO too.
Was JPO was very excited for that part of her life.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, members. Any other questions? All right, to closing us out, I do just have one question, and I know this is one that Chair Waters as well as the Budget Chair have maybe thought about, is I recognize that there are crosswalks, you know, they're ranked in tiers in the pedestrian plan, but, you know, we as council members get complaints from community members, and we often put our priorities in the budget as well. How do we make sure that our priorities as expressed in the budget actually get executed?
I know that when there are council ads, that's what we call them, that they are given serious consideration. They're not always followed. My best advice would be to just make a really good case for why it's going in the why you're putting it in the budget, and usually a good case trumps everything else.
Good to know. Richmond, you heard that? All right. Great. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Members, any discussion on this? Okay. Hearing none. In that case, we'll thank the department for this, and we will move on now to the next agenda item, which is our last agenda item, the informational briefing number 5, which is on the history and impact of taxi cab regulations on the city and county of Honolulu. I wanted to welcome the Department of Customer Services, which actually handles this, as well as representatives from Charlie's Taxi, which is the largest taxi company here on Oahu. Both of us are providing brief presentations. I'll call for questions after all of the presentations. Members, the presentations from Charlie's Taxi have been distributed to each of you. They're available online as miscellaneous communications 9 and 10. And then we also have a PowerPoint presentation from the Department of Customer Services as well. So from the Department of Customer Services, we have Kimberly Hashiro, the director, as well as Derek Mayashiro, the deputy director of Customer Services, and they'll actually be going first. So Dale, we'll have the department go first. Oh, okay, wait, never mind. I think on the agenda we had, who do we have listed first? Because I have the script. Okay, why don't we go with customer services then? All right. While we wait for the PowerPoint to get pulled up, clerks, do we have any registered in-person testifiers or anyone standing by in the chambers to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. And then clerks, do we have anyone registered remotely or standing by online to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. Very well. Try to get the PowerPoints up here. There we go. Okay, there we go. All right, well, we'll proceed. Please introduce yourself and take it away. If you could press the button on the right side.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. Derek Mayashiro, Deputy Director for the Department of Customer Services. Also present is Director Kim Hashiro and my assistant Sylvia Suzawa. So what we'll be doing today is just a general overview of the regulations for taxis and its impact, starting with first with fees. So next slide. Can I use the clicker? Okay, next slide. So, per the revised ordinance of the City and County of Honolulu, Section 36-1.9, the maximum fares and baggage charges for taxis are established by the CSD director. And I want to emphasize the word maximum. So it is a rate ceiling rather than a specific rate that must be charged. So the taxi operator can always charge less than the fares that are specified. The next bullet point, the fares and baggage charges are established through administrative rules through our department, and they are reviewed once every 2 years. And any changes of the fares and baggage charges are based upon the private transportation component of the Consumer Price Index for Honolulu, as determined by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Also, pursuant to the same ordinance, the CSD director may assess and establish a fuel surcharge through administrative rules. Next slide. So what you see here on the right-hand column is the current rate for taxi fares in the City and County of Honolulu. The last rate was established in 2013, and there's a side-by-side comparison as to the rates for the first mile, each additional mile, waiting time, regular baggage, extra large baggage. Extra large baggage would be something like a surfboard, and then the fuel surcharge, which was not in effect prior to the 2022 rate becoming effective. I should clarify that actually we started implementing the rate change in 2022, but it actually became effective in 2023. So it should actually say 2023 rate. So per the statute, every 2 years, our department does a rate assessment to see whether or not there should be a change up or down with the current rate. So in 2015, 2017, and 2019, the consumer price index actually dropped by double digits. Despite that drop, the department did not lower the rate. The rate remains the same as the 2013 rate, as you see in the center column. In 2021, there was a slight increase of 6% in the consumer price index. And in 2022, as fuel prices were increasing, the rate did increase to, or the CPI index increased by 25%. At that point in time, our department did take action to raise the rates, and those rates are reflected in the right column. Next slide. So the next slide here is you can see a comparison between Honolulu and the other counties. So right now for the first mile, Honolulu is the highest at $8.30. For each additional mile, Kauai is actually the highest at $4.50. The waiting charge, Honolulu is the highest, 56 cents per 45 seconds. For the regular baggage, Hawaii County is the highest at $1. And then the extra large baggage, Honolulu has the highest charge of $6.38. And we are the only county that does charge or allowed to be charged a fuel surcharge of $2.60. Next slide. So to assist the taxi industry, what CSD did was, on October 25, 2022, we issued a memo to the taxi industry that allowed them to pass along certain third-party entrance fees. And these are the type of fees that are assessed at the time of entry. So for instance, Hanauma Bay has a couple dollar fee, $3. Diamond Head, there's an entry fee of $2. The airport concession has a pickup fee there for $5. So our memo was intended to allow the taxi companies to pass that charge on to the consumer. We also allowed taxi companies to charge GE tax, which had not done previously. Okay. So that was the current rates with Honolulu and other counties. And now when we get to the ability to assess or regulate taxis, that's actually found in Hawaii revised statutes. So Hawaii has its own motor carrier laws, and that's in chapter HRS 21, chapter 8, HRS chapter 271. However, in that chapter, it specifically exempts taxis. And HRS 271 references HRS 46-16.5 for the county's power to regulate taxis and other types of motor vehicle, public transportation for motor vehicles. 46-16.5, every county is empowered to regulate the entry into the business of providing public passenger vehicle service, the rate charged, and the establishment of stands for those vehicles. Next slide. So our department actually has the 1978 Code of, or Revised Ordinances of Honolulu, the 1983 version. So if we're gonna be talking about the history of regulations, we thought it might make sense to start with what was there back in 1978. There used to be a regulation where the number of taxis was limited. And that was based upon an assessment by the DTS director who looked at a variety of different factors, including the number of existing taxis, public demand, whether traffic conditions would be affected by an increase of taxis, and the wages and working conditions of existing taxi operators, and how more taxis might be affected by that. Next slide. Back in 1978, there were also ordinances and regulations requiring city council to establish the placement of the stands based upon the DTS director's recommendation. It also allowed the director of finance to issue, deny, renew, suspend, or revoke taxi driver certificates. So I've included what the current law is, or where the current citation is for each specific section of the 1978 code. For the second one, 12-1.4, regarding the issuance, denial, renewal, and suspension of taxi driver certificates, there's a version of it which can be found in ROH chapter 36-6.2, but it's not the same as it is here, and we'll get into that a little bit later. There's also regulations that no additional passengers can be picked up without the consent of all passengers, and the taxi must have a meter that's calibrated to the current rate and inspected as required by law. Next slide. There are also requirements as to who and what criteria is used to issue a taxi driver certificate. It's a driver's license, 1 year of driving experience, knowledge of traffic laws and ordinances, knowledge of roads, highways, landmarks, and a sufficient understanding back then of the English language. Next slide. At this point in time, the fares and baggage was actually set by City Council. And in 1978, you can see what the charges were and how it's changed over the years. There's also a requirement back then, and there still is today, that the fares must be posted within 12 inches of the taxi meter and where it is visible to all passengers in the vehicle. Next slide. In 1978, taxis must maintain trip records, including the number of passengers, the date, time, and odometer reading at the time of boarding, and the same information at the time of discharge. Next slide. Taxis must be reasonably clean and kept in a safe condition. The exterior must be free from cracks, breaks, major dents. That language is still found in today's citation, today's ordinance. Taxi licenses were issued by the Director of Finance and cost annually of $25. This version is much different than it is back then, as you will see a little bit later. Taxis also are required to have a sign or dome on the top of their roof, specifying the name of the operator or company and a phone number. And then there was a enforcement provision allowing for a penalty of up to $1,000 or imprisonment not more than 1 year. Next slide. So Ordinance 88-98 did a couple things. Number one, it repealed the limitation on the number of taxis. It also prohibited kickbacks from hotel doormen. It allowed taxis to charge less than the total metered amount at the time of destination and deboarding. It established taxi control numbers for all taxis. Now they're called certification numbers. It required taxis to take the most direct or economical route. It also required motor vehicle insurance coverage with specified limits. And it established what's called shared rides. Shared rides is defined as a taxi cab that's used in transporting passengers to and from unrelated locations, which may be other than terminals or fixed stands. It is in essence sort of like a chartered shuttle bus where you can pick up multiple passengers, where there would not be a need for all the passengers to consent to pick up additional passengers. And they'll go to selected locations and drop off passengers. Next slide. Ordinance 90-84. This shifted the establishment of fares and baggage charges from the City Council to the Director of Finance back then, and specified the criteria for how the fares can be amended. Next slide. Ordinance 93-85 allowed the Director of Finance to inspect the condition of the taxis to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements at the time of the initial issuance of the taxi license and upon renewal of the taxi license. This law no longer, or this ordinance no longer exists, this requirement, and it has impacted the Department of Customer Services in terms of monitoring and having an understanding of the safety of the vehicles and how many vehicles are actually on the road. But we'll circle back to that. Next slide. Ordinance 94-87 required the taxi operator to provide a receipt upon the customer's request that must specify the origin and destination, all fares that were charged, the name of the taxi operator, and the name and phone number of the taxi company. Next slide. Ordinance 05-5 changed the Director of Finance to the Department or Director of Customer Services, and Ordinance 08-9 allowed the Director to charge a fuel surcharge to passengers. Next slide. In 2016, there were two bills, and this was an attempt to blend together regulations for not just taxis, but also transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. So on April 28th, 2016, Bill 36 was first introduced, and that eventually became Ordinance 16-5 in August of 2016. On September 1, 2016, Bill 55 was introduced, which subsequently became Ordinance 16-38. 1638 either repealed or largely amended what was in 1625. So what we'll really be doing in the next couple slides is taking a close look at what Ordinance 1638 did. Next slide. So first of all, they created a category called private transportation company. And this is comprised of either a taxi company or a transportation network company, or TNC. It defined a private transportation driver as either a taxi cab driver or a driver for a transportation network company. And it defined a transportation or a private transportation vehicle as either a taxi cab or a personal vehicle used by a transportation network company driver. Next slide. So Ordinance 16-38 required private transportation companies to register annually with the Department of Customer Services. It required private transportation companies to certify their drivers. This was a role that the Department of Customer Services had done before, but now it has shifted to private transportation companies to certify their own drivers. Ordinance 16-38 also prohibited the certification of private transportation drivers who committed a select number of violations or convicted of various felonies, drug offenses, sex offenses, things of that nature. Next slide. The ordinance also required private transportation companies to certify drivers who are 21 years old. That was a change because before it was 18. Have a valid driver's license, 1 year of driving experience, motor vehicle insurance, pass a national background check, physically able to operate a motor vehicle, understands traffic laws, understands location of streets, and can communicate to the passengers. There's no restriction on it just being English, but an ability to communicate with passengers. Ordinance 16-38 also prohibited private transportation drivers from transporting more passengers than the number of seatbelts, consuming alcohol while on duty or within 8 hours prior to going on duty, prohibits them from smoking while the passenger is in the vehicle, operating an electronic or digital device, including a GPS device without any types of hands-free mount. And it also prohibits the use of offensive language, expressions, gestures while passengers are present. Next slide. It also repealed, as I said, the requirement for a CSD director to inspect the taxis upon the issuance and renewal of taxi license. That shifted to the transportation network. Private transportation company who is required to ensure that the vehicle has current motor vehicle registration, current safety check, valid insurance coverage. Next slide. And Ordinance 16-38 also had some enforcement provisions, as you can see here. So, Ordinance 16-38 really tried to balance taxi cabs with transportation network companies. It should be noted that the legislature in 2022 passed Act 57. Act 57 basically shifted any regulation for TNCs to the State Department of Transportation. So Act 57 supersedes any city ordinance that deals specifically with transportation network companies. But those requirements still apply to taxi cabs. Okay, next slide. So the impact that the regulations have had on the Department of Customer Services is when Ordinance 16-38 was enacted, it shifted the responsibilities for the city to certify drivers and to inspect vehicles. That made us it made us lose touch a little bit with the industry. So when COVID happened, and there was a need to understand how the taxi industry was affected, we didn't have the ability, or it was very difficult for us to obtain numbers to see how many taxi drivers were still around, how many taxi vehicles were still around. That kind of shifted, our ability to kind of keep touch with the industry. And the other thing it did, as it impacted our department, is that we lost an opportunity to effectuate some enforcement. So it used to be when the city had the responsibility of inspecting the vehicles, we could at that time be sure that the motor vehicle had a proper registration, insurance, safety check, and if they didn't, we wouldn't renew the certification for the vehicle for the next year. Now, because that has shifted to the companies, we're really relying on the transportation network or the private transportation companies to do the job that the city once did. So that's how it has impacted us. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are.
Members, why don't we have Charlie's, go right into Charlie's, and then we can kind of, I think that'll be helpful for us to explore. Members, I do recognize today's been a long day, especially since everyone was in budget this morning.
Thank you.
But I think this is valuable for us since this is an industry that is constantly changing, and as the Deputy Director mentioned, there are, I think, things that they probably need more information on. So we have with us Dale Evans, the CEO of Charlie's Taxi, and members of her staff as well.
Aloha. Thank you very much for having us over here. Actually, I was not prepared to talk about reforming the taxi ordinance. It was my understanding that we were supposed to talk about the regular reform of the taxi fares. But I would like to address some of the what I consider misstatements or misinterpretation of the history. In 1945, December 6th, my father led the industry to repeal the limitation of taxis, the taxi medallion system that was enacted in 1942 because there were 250 military that invaded the island. What he referred to, the ordinance, the limitation of taxis, I think that was in 1978, and that was a resolution. It was not an ordinance. And in 1982, the Corporation Council ruled that that was unconstitutional. So there was not an ordinance actually that made the limitation of taxis. Today, we are faced with a shortage. There is a transportation crisis. So talking about limitation of taxis does not make sense because taxis are an essential service and we don't have enough taxis today. I also want to talk about the Act 57 that he mentioned. Actually, the legislature and the council helped to create a cartel, a TNC cartel. The taxi industry has been changed since 2014 when the TNCs came to Honolulu. In 2016, that's correct, the council enacted Ordinance 36-6, which was ROH 12-6. And it gave the TNCs an economic advantage to have no rate regulation, to have no regulation of the types of vehicles that they can operate. And there was, they set a lower insurance cost that the TNC drivers either do not have to pay for, or if they pay for the insurance, it's only 20% of what the taxi cab drivers have to pay. In other words, if the taxi driver is paying $4,000 for insurance a year, commercial insurance, the TNC driver only has to pay $700. So that's another way that the ordinance was unfair to the industry. So the tourism industry, when we talk about these issues, we have to talk about the marketing. And the thing is that the tourism industry is in trouble. The Japanese market is in limbo. And the reason why the Japanese market is different is because it has the Ministry of Tourism in Japan has a law that says that if a visitor doesn't get what they pay for, that the wholesaler, the tour wholesaler, or the vendor has to reimburse the claimant. Not only reimburse, they have to pay restitution. And the restitution is for all travel costs and for emotional distress. So we have to change how we do business, and we have to do a better job on how we do it. So we need to be excellent because we are competing against many destinations. Hawaii has dropped in ranking in the tourism industry, and we need to provide alternative vehicle choices. So I would like to have our first presenter of 6 to talk to you, and we will each individually, if you will ask questions on them so we don't have to go up and down. Thank you.
And sorry, how long do we think that the 6 presenters will take? I just wasn't aware that there's 6 presenters.
I'd say it's rather quick.
Okay, great.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time. I know it's been a long day. My name is Christine Kawasaki. I am the concierge for Always Charlie's for 2 decades. Transportation, Charlie's is the only transportation company with a concierge, and we're available 24/7. What the concierge does, we focus on transportation, customer service, making sure the VIP service, quality, and professionalism is at its best top priority. We handle all the VIPs, we handle conventions, transportation, and we also handle the most important is the kapunas going back and forth just to the market. With the best technology for our entire operations, the guests are always safe. Our VIP reservations come through our website, or executives, secretaries call us to make their reservations for their bosses to be meet and greet at the airport. We do what's called VIP greeting. We'll track the flight. We'll get you at the baggage claim with fresh flower leis that we pick up prior to the airport and bring you to your hotels. Charlie's Taxis always have contracted. We have a lot of contracted transportation companies like hotels, Hilton, Disney Alani, Waikiki Beach Marriott. We are the transportation company for those hotels. Next page. Also, if you look on the web, corporate partners, these are all our contracted. We do all the transportation for Hawaiian Airlines, from Hospital Shriners to, Kuakini Hospital. We handle all the corporate partners' transportation. Japan Airlines, many hospitals. We also do Straub and Queens. Resorts like Turtle Bay, it's very, very far, but we pick the guests up and we take them to the airport. We handle all the ownerships of a lot of the resorts. Turtle Bay, Haseko Builders here in Hawaii, who's building for over 50 years, but transport their owners back and forth to the airport. Hotels companies, how it's hard for us is we have 6 different vehicles. We have sedans, minivans, small SUV, large SUV, limousine, and sprinters, 1 to 8 seaters, all with the same rate. And those vehicles run from $35,000 at purchase up to $90,000 per purchase with all the same regulated rate. That's why we are here today to ask you to stop the regulated rate so we can charge at the amount of the cost of the vehicles so we can transport the guests, which the vehicles that they want. Any questions? Okay. The next person I'd like to set up to you right now is Mohammed. He's the driver's CSA advisory. Or Agnes? Or Selena?
No, Selena.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One of Mohammed next. The slides are for Mohammed. No, we're not going to spare us.
Okay, Selena. Right now, Selena, she is the head dispatcher at the Hilton at our office here at our business center.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Selena Romana Aina. I am the onboarding coach and lead dispatcher. I also oversee the training for airport greeters that we send to the airport for Always Charlie's. At the airport, our greeters assist customers to their taxis. We are staging at the center median, which is across the FIT international arrivals, and we direct our customers into the parking garage where they are safely picked up. On the left photo, here on the screen, shows the lineup of customers waiting for the TNC and independent taxis. That day, their ETAs were 45 minutes long compared to our line on the right side, which was much shorter with lower estimated pickup times due to drivers effectively moving in as quickly and safely as possible to ensure that our customers are picked up and on their way to enjoying their vacation. Our call center team of dispatchers and call takers are well trained to multitask between answering email reservations, phone reservations, as well as assisting customers, our corporate accounts, and drivers with general questions or possible disputes. We strive to ensure safety and speedy service as our dispatchers are equipped with a two-way radio and the MTI messaging system to optimize taxi operation efficiency. Our drivers are best on the roads due to the training that Charlie's provides. We run a 24/7 call center that is divided between the English-speaking and Japanese-speaking dispatchers. And due to the Japanese market being what it is now, our hours of operation for Japanese-speaking dispatchers is between 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. We provide live, local, and in-person support for drivers and customers instead of speaking to an AI system. Our dispatchers have the capability to monitor live GPS tracking as well as traffic with these specific tools. Our MTI GPS can track the driver's vehicle anywhere on this island. And our Netrodyne, which is the camera system, it also provides GPS tracking, which provides a live feed of our inward and outward view of the driver's vehicle. We also use local applications such as Go Akamai, and ways to update drivers with heavy traffic and accident alerts that occur on the road. Our analog lines opposed to the digital lines are our backup, which is located at each desk. So that way our phone lines are never disconnected and we are always operational. We have the most reliable radio system in Hawaii with 900 megahertz. We also have 5 radio antennas located in the following areas: the H&L Airport, the Diamond Head, Hilton Hawaiian Village, Charlie's Taxi, and Ko'olina Aulani. So in case of an outage, we have a backup generator that will stay running for 3 days with immediate power. Our live GPS tracking map is color-coded and it shows active, inactive, or unavailable drivers throughout the 30 zones across Oahu. We have collected data that stores drivers' trips with their GPS tracking log, which is helpful in case of a dispute and ensuring drivers are taking the most direct route possible. Our cameras store up to 100 hours of drive time for a range of 8 to 10 days. Our emergency rescue system. Each taxi is equipped with 3 emergency buttons. And once the driver triggers the panic button, the alarm is automatically activated and sent directly to our dispatchers. So in case of a suspicious passenger, our drivers can trigger the panic button without alerting the rider that the alarm has been set. The dispatcher can then view the live camera and notify HPD, EMS of the situation and driver's well-being and coordinates. Now, this is a situation that occurred on July 24th of last year involving a customer who had a seizure in the driver's vehicle. Following the proper protocol, the driver was able to relay the incident to the dispatcher, and EMS and HPD was quick on the scene to address the situation. We at Always Charlie's, we make it a great importance to uphold safety for everyone. Thank you for your time. If anyone have any questions.
All right. Who's up next?
I'm going to turn it over to Gary.
Aloha, thanks. I'll be brief as well. I'm sure you've been here all day. My name is Gary Schuring. I represent Kavanaugh Associates, insurance company here. We provide the insurance for Charlie's Taxi and for a number of their drivers. I'm here today to attest to the safety considerations that Charlie's Taxi has made in the efforts to make Hawaii's roadways safer for both their customers and employees alike. Charlie's drivers are on the road roughly 250,000 hours a year. That's a lot of time behind the wheel. Not long ago, Charlie's made a significant and sizable investment in their operation with the purchase of a sophisticated cameras which use AI technology and a state-of-the-art simulator used for real lifelike training of the drivers. The cameras are in each of the taxis and are used to view both the road ahead and inside the vehicle's passenger compartment. The technology is reading constantly while the vehicle's in operation. Things like their speed, moving cars ahead, stoplights, stop signs, pedestrians, cyclists, animals, obstructions, and other dangers outside. Inside, it's looking at the driver and checking for driver behavior like distracted driving or looking down for prolonged periods, cell phone use while driving, drowsiness, and other behaviors. The cameras are designed to alert the driver of certain hazardous conditions like maintain safe distance if they're driving too close to the cars in front of them, or please slow down if they're driving too fast. It can also be used to absolve drivers of fault in certain cases when an accident does occur, or identify unlawful customers who put drivers at risk on the road. They've also got a safety coordinator to monitor these behavior alerts and address specific risks with the drivers individually. That's really where I come in. The payoff of this investment is really in the numbers and in many ways. Just to give some perspective, between the years of 2010 and 2019, Charlie's had around 111 vehicles on the road, and the drivers experienced an average of 45 accidents per year. About 20 of those were considered at fault. After installing the cameras and Virage simulator, Charlie's now has about 139 vehicles on the road, and these numbers went down to just 15.5 accidents per year, a decrease of 65%, and only 10 at-fault accidents per year, a decrease of 50%. Additionally, they saw a 48% reduction in stop sign violations and 42% reduction in stop light violations. I hope this can serve as adequate evidence of Charlie's commitment to keep Hawaii's roads and their employees safe. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I'd like to address any questions the panel has regarding the safety systems in place at Charlie's. Good.
Thank you, council members. So now we'd like to address the reason we're here today. Some of that we had to explain to give you a little bit more context and understanding as to how all of this plays together. So we're really here to raise the issue of unequal taxi rate regulation, which has driven Honolulu's taxi industry to the verge of collapse.
And you could say your name for the record, thanks.
Oh, sorry. Yes, my name is Ryan Naka. I'm a legislative advisor for Charlie's Taxi. Okay, so as you've seen from previous slides, Charlie's runs a very complex business, which currently operates under a single rate structure that's set by the city, specifically Department of Customer Services. So why do we share all of this information with you? Our drivers and all other taxi drivers in Honolulu play a pivotal role in Hawaii's transportation ecosystem. Not only do we support Hawaii's main industry of tourism, but we also transport lab samples, organ transplants, respond to distress flights, and much more. And you can't rely on TNCs to handle these vital services. We're here to ask for your awareness and support in repealing rate control in order to be able to innovate, to provide better service, improved efficiency, more competitive pricing for taxi services, ultimately benefiting the city's transportation ecosystem. I also want to make sure that we all understand that we are not advocating for total deregulation of taxi ordinances. There's components of the ordinance pertaining to safety that we think should remain. It's just about the rates. On this slide, you see a graph that shows a comparison of taxis to residents per taxi. As you can see, the demand for taxis are great. And this graph here does not include visitors. Without rate regulation, we'd be able to innovate and attract more drivers to meet the demand. In this slide, you can see this is a complaint actually filed with CSD about an individual in Hawaii Kai that actually called a taxi with our competitor. She had to wait 20 minutes for a call, never got a call, ended up having to walk home. It took her 2 hours. Really just highlights the fact that there are a need for more taxi drivers, and this is also dated in 2019, before the pandemic. And so we've been dealing with the shortage of taxis for many years now. In 1986, the Office of Consular Services published a report after reviewing the taxi rate setting policies and practices in Honolulu. They state the existing fare structure has failed to recognize operational differences that exist within the taxi industry, which is composed of disparate and often competing interests. Its effect is a lack of competition and economic inefficiency. So the reason that we shared with all of you today our operations and proprietary information is because we really wanted to show you that there's a huge difference between large taxi companies and independent drivers. There's a difference between a sedan and a Chevy Suburban. And so we have to consider all of those factors and how this single rate for different types of companies, but also different types of vehicles affects the industry. So there's many challenges with the way that the taxi rates are set. Like mentioned before, CSD uses the private transportation component of the CPI, Consumer Price Index, to set the rates. The problem with this metric is that it's historical. So it's essentially an average of what people spent on transportation, and that's what's used to set the rate. it doesn't consider the actual cost of business. Another problem, like mentioned, is that it only is one rate, and we need to be able to innovate considering the types of vehicles and obviously the structure of our business. A taxi company has much different expenses and needs compared to an independent driver. Competitors, such as TNCs, are able to set their rates while we're fixed to a single rate. I also kind of want to address the CPI and how that has gone down. You know, although I appreciate CSD not lowering our rates per the CPI, it sort of is an indicator, yet again, how CPI is not a good metric. Because if you look at the cost of living and doing business in Hawaii, I don't think any of us can recall it ever going down. In this slide, it's a comparison of how taxis are fixed to one single rate, while our competitors, TNCs, are able to innovate, charge what they need to, according to different times of day, class of vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. So there's different types of taxi systems across the world. Generally, we have a closed system and we have an open system. So in a closed system, you essentially are restricted to much more stringent requirements, as well as the medallion system, which is expensive to enter. And so cities like New York City have a medallion system where it essentially protects the industry, and therefore rate regulations need to be applied, compared to an open entry system where you meet some basic requirements and you're able to enter the market. Hawaii, or Honolulu specifically, is also challenged in that we have an open entry system, but we fix rates as if we were in a closed system. And so it's conflicting because you have an open entry where it encourages competition like TNCs, but then we are restricting one component of the industry, i.e. taxes. And so that becomes a problem because now you have competition, but one sector of transportation is limited to the rates while the other is able to innovate as they should be able to. We can go next slide. Okay. So taxi rate regulations in Honolulu date back 69 years ago to 1954. Keep in mind, this was 17 years prior to the arrival of the bus. And so, you know, imagine in 1954, prior to that, there really was no form of public transportation. So the public really relied on taxis. So fast forward, now you have the bus. Fast forward to 2014, now you have TNCs. Fast forward to the recent future, we have the rail. And so now consumers have a plethora of options to choose from for transportation, including their own personal vehicles, which we all sit in traffic every day and witness. And so I think what we're looking at is a really archaic law and regulation pertaining to rates, because at that time, maybe the council felt like they needed to protect the consumer because that was the main form of transportation. Fast forward to today, we have, in addition to the different types of transportation, we have a lot of competition. I think it's time that we repeal the rate control. And what will happen in the open market, the free market, is if we charge too much, if our service is not up to par, then people simply will not use us. And that's how the economy should work. So there are other countries, counties, states across the globe that have deregulated taxis, specifically rates. New Zealand is a great example of how the removal of rate regulation provided a wide array of benefits for consumers and drivers. After they ended regulations in 1989, they saw tangible benefits such as decline in fares, increase in number of taxi cabs, shorter waiting times, greater range of services, a wider range of taxi service across market segments, wider geographic coverage, more driving jobs, and the number of taxi companies in metro centers tripled. So there's huge benefits that come with allowing taxi companies to innovate. These are on this slide countries, states, counties that have no rate regulations. And then in cities like Portland, Austin, LA, Washington, DC, New York City, and Houston, they actually have a dual rate regulation, which allows taxi cab companies like Charlie's to set their own rates, while independent and cruising taxis are subject to rate control. So Honolulu without taxis would suffer greatly. You have Uber and Lyft, TNCs with no competition and would continue to price surge, leaving consumers with no option but to pay steep prices. No essential services like distress flights, organ transplant, and other services. Loss of GE revenue, tourism would suffer without transportation services. So again, we humbly ask for your support in amending 36-1.9 to allow taxis to set rates according to market conditions and vehicle types, just as our competitors are allowed to. You know, I'll paint the example of competition within our airlines. You know, we have one airline, they tend to charge more. Service doesn't really matter if it's that great. But then now you introduce a second airline, right? And all of a sudden prices come down. So really what we want is to encourage competition. We're huge believers in competition because at the end of the day, the consumer will benefit. We need a level playing field, removing rate regulations and an open entry system, which will lead to better services, improved efficiency, and more competitive pricing for taxi services, ultimately benefiting the city's transportation ecosystem, the consumers, and drivers. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Charlie's Taxis as well as CSD for coming. I know that this is a very challenging topic because there's a lot of regulatory movement with the advent of TNCs. There's a long history, as we've seen, of how the current taxi regulations in the city and county of Honolulu have arrived. And there's going to be, you know, further changes, I think, in how taxis and TNCs, you know, operate over the next few years with even more technology. And so I wanted to give the Transportation Committee members just this brief understanding, because at some point, these things are going to come back. And I think that at some point, as CSD mentioned, you know, even they, I think, need more information and need the ability to get this. And of course, as we heard from Charlie's, they are requesting changes that would help them to be more competitive against the TNCs, because I think it is in our interest to have a robust transportation system for people who don't drive, can't use the bus for whatever reason, for whatever trips they need to do, as well as our visitors. So with that, members, are there any questions for any of the presenters today? We can also, I think this, because it's going to be an ongoing conversation, I think there'll be an opportunity to ask them in writing as well as to ask them individually. But I wanted to make sure we had this early on in this year, because these things are going to come up quickly with new changes. So, any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Say.
Director Morton? Roger? Me? Yeah. You know, with our paratransit handicap vans and buses, what is their going rate, as an example? Sharing it with Charlie's and, you know, DCS.
Full disclosure, Roger Morton, former Charlie's taxi driver,
Okay.
back when I went to UH. I can say that the taxi business is a pretty tough business. We utilize taxis in paratransit. I don't have a current contract with Charlie's, but that's at their choice, not ours. We did go out for a bid for that, and Dale's got her reasons. I'm not, and she kind of doesn't like the way we control things, but that's her reason. But we, her major competitor, we support the cab, which is the biggest other big large company who has shifted a lot of their business to handy van, probably something close to 50%, my guess, because of the challenge that the taxi industry does have. And I certainly am sympathetic to the taxi industry. I totally agree that we need to do what we can to have a vibrant industry.
And actually, Director, before you sit down, I wanted to ask about the kind of last mile and micro mobility. Is that the right word? I don't know if that's the right word, but for these areas where maybe bus service doesn't work, is this something that your department's been looking at extensively?
I think that there's opportunities for our very low-density bus routes to look toward some type of micro-mobility, whether that be with a taxi or whether it be another. It certainly doesn't make sense to send a $100 an hour taxi up a hill to transport one or two people when that could be done much more economically with a different type of vehicle.
You mean the $100 an hour bus? Yeah. Sorry, you said $100 taxi going up the hill?
No, the $100 bus going up the hill.
Yep. Member Tupola.
Oh, while Director Martin's up there, so in your perspective, based on their stance for keeping some of the safety regulations and, you know, making the playing field even, you believe that that's the correct way to go?
I'm reluctant to get too deep because, you know, the Department of Customer Services is the agency responsible for regulating taxis. So all I can say is from a transportation perspective, I value having taxis available for our residents.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, I wanted to thank our presenters on both of the topics, the pedestrian plan, as well as our taxi regulations. Again, these are things that we're going to have to grapple with over the next few years with changes to technology and changes to just the whole ecosystem around transportation. All of these presentations are going to be available, if they're not already, on our website via DocuShare, and so we'll have the ability to refer back to them at any time. And then I believe that the representatives from Charlie's as well as CSD will be available if we have any questions in writing. And I look forward to continuing this conversation. So with that, there being no further business, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. It's 4:41, and we'll see you tomorrow for all of our committee meetings tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.